What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and the Star Wars Outlaw controversies keep coming with more people throwing their hats into the ring, and it's getting quite insane, to put it simply. I woke up to a firestorm, and now I gotta sift through the wreckage like an old battered detective who's too old for this and find out what's really going on. From Outlaw developers being held hostage in a cult-like way, a former Riot Games artist blasting Gamergate 2 and protecting ugly female video game characters, and then there's Tomb Raider, which is now about seeking truth apparently, and much more. Let's start with Outlaws, because this is a doozy. In case you didn't know, Star Wars Outlaws is getting absolutely decimated online by everyone pretty much, because the game looks like yet another modern audience slop simulator in the making. The game stars Kay Vess, or as Yellow Flash and Erotic put it, her name is Ma'am Solo, which I think fits much better. So Ma'am Solo is a scoundrel and is totally better in every way than any scoundrel before her because she's a woman, of course. She also has a massive crimson chin and looks like a human-alien hybrid with weirdly spaced out eyes, a jawline that could crush diamonds, and a discount Sigourney Weaver haircut. Ma'am Solo will absolutely go down in history as one of the Star Wars characters of all time. Of course, because this game is made by an Ubisoft-owned studio, particularly Massive Entertainment, which has made games like The Division 1 and 2, as well as Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, which is one of the rare AAA games I actually just stopped playing outright. Cause it was far too big and repetitive, and the story was terrible, and the game was designed to be a massive, no pun intended, single-player grindfest in order to get anything done within it. Disappointing does not even begin to describe Frontiers of Pandora, let me tell you. So it's no surprise that Massive's next big release, Star Wars Outlaws, looks like it's going to be like Avatar as well. Obscenely big for no other reason than it can be, and features deliberately ugly female characters and of course a white male antagonist for good measure. Everyone is hating on this game, and for good reason. It doesn't help that if you want the full experience Massive has for Ma'am Solo Simulator, you have to fork well over $150 for the season pass, all pre-order DLC, early access, and the full game and more. Ubisoft is absolutely going to town, ensuring they can milk as much money as humanly possible out of every jaded Star Wars player they can. And they're hoping your blind allegiance to a franchise that has been drowning in apathy on pretty much every front will be enough to cloud your vision into buying this at release for way more money than it's worth. A lot of these issues would be overlooked if the main character didn't look like they were made in a lab by a group of feminists who refuse to tell you what a woman is. Of course, there was this one guy who decided to white knight for Ubisoft's Fem Wars Simulator, and before I show you what they said, please don't harass this person. Even though they clearly hate us and want us to kneel down and eat the slop like good slaves, we must not stoop down to their level. The person in question is Michael Marino, who goes by Iron Stylus on Twitter. He's a former artist at Riot Games who's worked on stuff like League of Legends. He said a lot of things, but if I read it all to you, we'd be here for days on end as he attempts to mental gymnastics his brain around everything, and explain why Western dev studios are unable to create a one-to-one female character design transition. Apparently, he says things like lighting and the use of makeup can completely change a woman's face, which, yeah, okay, that doesn't take a genius to realize. Here's but a fraction of his insanely long thread, where he says stuff like, going back to hyper-realistic models, especially the scanned models, you have everything from tons of sculpted detail, maybe not tweaked by the artist. All sorts of maps on the model, spec, roughness, blah blah, crazy shaders for subsurface scattering, etc. So there are so many things to tweak and make balanced. Imagine having like 100 parameters as to how the character will express just in a few frames, or in a real-time environment, which could cause all sorts of weirdness. So yeah, I can near guarantee you this translation issue has much more to do with all those parameters affecting the model in the specific context of this shot, to make it look a bit different from the source actor, but also like entirely different context here. So apparently the reason why Ma'am Solo looks like the Star Wars version of the mask is due to all of these impossible parameters that are affecting game development simultaneously. So naturally, that means we must just accept ugly women because this former Riot guy said so. He then attempts to use Cyberpunk 2077's Johnny Silverhand as an example of this, where he says, lighting meshes a lot with any geometry in games, especially when 3D scanning is involved. A scan will snag virtually any detail. And that detail is translated into depth, texture, volumes, etc., which of course cast shadow. More severe angles will create harsher shadows. This is why many artists don't go off of scans, and when they do, there's a lot of post-scan editing. Even for celebrities who may have been sampled, because you have to alter the shape and form to smooth out specific aspects. Even Johnny here isn't a one-to-one of Keanu. The modeler, if they're going off of the scan, will have to tweak and push and pull to make sure certain bits don't catch shadows and light because they might be more appealing. So the model here has been smooth in certain areas and sharpened in others. I mean, come on, Keanu isn't that smooth. Sure, maybe some of that is to idealize him, but idealize Keanu? No, it's to make sure the lighting doesn't catch every crevice. Ultimately, the flatter a texture is, like sans normal bumps maps, the better the lighting will affect it. So this is a whole lot of mumbo jumbo talk as to why devs apparently cannot accurately display any character one-to-one. However, I think we can agree that Johnny Silverhand looks a lot more like Keanu Reeves than Crimson Chin Weaver does when it comes to their actor they're based on. To compare these two as equal examples is pretty insane and would only be true if the person you asked was blind in both eyes and had no concept of what human beings looked like. The answer is that this was deliberately done. Not to mention, when you compare what this Iron Stylist guy says to, say, Japanese body scans, his entire argument falls apart like toilet paper in a rainstorm. For example, look at Death Stranding, and here we can see Fragile, who looks exactly like her actor. Sure, different hairstyle and clothes, but that face is absolutely her actor's face. Here's another character in Death Stranding. Yet again, they look exactly like their actor. Sure, they may have to change a little on lighting, but come on, dude, if you have a pair of eyeballs, and even a vague concept of what human beings looks like, this disproves his claims completely. Not to mention Capcom, here's 4 female characters from their recent Resident Evil remakes ranging from Resi 2, 3, and 4, compared to their actual face models. They look exactly like the real people. Look at Ashley Graham here in Resident Evil 4, dude. That's a one-to-one translation. There's no wiggle room there at all. Even Jill Valentine looks exactly like her face model. If you even go back further to, say, Metal Gear Solid 4, Kojima accurately translated models' faces and everything as well. So my question to that Iron Stylist dude is, why is Japan capable of accurately face scanning actors, but the West can't for some reason? It's not like Japanese game devs somehow have better technology available to them or something. You can't tell me with a straight face that some of the biggest AAA game developers in the Western world don't have access to the same tech or better than Japanese devs. There's no way. And also, a lot of the facial scannings and scenes for games like Death Stranding were filmed in Los Angeles, which means Kojima was using technology and equipment provided by Western studios when making his video game. I mean, Death Stranding is based on the Decima engine, the same one Horizon was made on. And yet, lo and behold, Sam from Death Stranding is also a one-to-one translation of Norman Reedus. So why is it that when it comes to Japan, everything works flawlessly and actor transition to video game character is completely fine and totally doable? There's no excuse for Ma'am Solo to look like a sleep paralysis demon, absolutely zero. The only reason why this was done was simply because it was deliberately pushed by Massive Entertainment's higher-ups. And if you look deeper into Massive's inner workings, the situation shows that they're more of a cult than anything else. Immediately, when you go to their site and you go to their commitments page, you're immediately met with swarms of people holding pride flags. It gets way weirder though, because if you look deeper, you'll eventually find a page where Massive Entertainment staff was pushed to virtue signal for International Women's Day. And it gets super weird from here on out when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws and the people behind it. You start finding these bizarre virtue signaling posts where employees are asked to tell their bosses what does equality mean for them. And they even have a goddamn hand signal where they imitate the equal sign with their hands. Some of these devs who are absolutely not being held hostage at all said things like, "Equality means that all people, regardless of their birth or background, deserve the same respect and opportunity. For some, this will mean being provided aid so that they may aspire to rise above social, mental, or physical friction which might otherwise prevent them from succeeding. We're all on this boat together and we don't have long on this ride. Be kind, be weird, be free, trans rights are human rights." Another dev said, "For me, equality is providing cerebral opportunities to women. where they can be mother and CEO at the same time and no one question about how they can manage all. What the hell is cerebral opportunities? You mean like situations where you can use your brain? What? Fellas, is it misogynist to use your brain in your daily life to overcome the challenges you face every day? Have you taken a second to think to yourself when you're making a coffee or going outside to get something, how that affects women's rights? I personally enjoy the cerebral opportunities I engage with, like when I take a shower and need to decide whether I wash my hair first or my balls. Or maybe when I face cerebral opportunities when I'm eating, do I slice my steak first or do I eat some of the salad instead? These are the issues we must juggle when thinking how our actions affect women's rights, fellas. So the next time you have any thought to yourself in your brain ever, just remember you are somehow a misogynist because feminism. It's weirder still, another dev said, not having to do other people's emotional labor. What does that even mean? Not having to deal with people's problems that have nothing to do with you? What? Is this dev saying equality is just minding your own business? Why not just say that? Why does everything have to be a mental rigmarole with these people? I could keep going, like there's just plenty of other examples on their International Women's Day page, but it comes across more so like developers being held hostage than anything else. It screams HR department white women who are probably looking for ways to increase ESG or bridge scores with nonsense like this. And when you start to throw in hand symbols in order to prove your virtueness, it honestly just comes across as insanely weird, and that's putting it lightly. There was at least one dev who is clearly based and thinks this is all stupid who said, "We are here to work, and if anything, we should be judged by our competences, not by the way we look." This guy just looks fed up as hell, and it's hilarious that Massive's HR department shared what he said, not realizing he's likely sticking a middle finger to them. This guy just said, "Stop virtue signaling and leave me alone. I'm just here to work and get a paycheck. Stop bothering me," and honestly, good for him. I mean, we've all been there at a job when some manager unironically states that this isn't a job, this is a family. And then everyone looks at each other like, what the fresh hell is this person smoking, dude? Like, are you kidding me? Sorry to say, but jobs are not family. Managers and such pull that sort of nonsense in order to throw some wool over your eyes and ensure that they can guilt trip you in the future. If you're conditioned to see your job as a family, then when that manager calls you on your day off to come in because someone is sick or whatever, they're hoping that family speech will make you cave in and take the shift. Again, need I repeat, work is not a family, it is a job. You are there to work and earn a paycheck so you can live and hopefully make ends meet. Anytime an employer pulls that, they are trying to manipulate you. But kudos to this long-bearded man with a pint in his hand saying, "Look, HR people, I don't care, alright? Leave me alone and let me drink." And I get where he's coming from, but as you can see, Massive Entertainment, which again is making Star Wars Outlaw, has their woke weirdo mentalities running really deep. These developers are being held at ideological gunpoint to virtue signal at any given opportunity these HR people can find. Can you imagine if one of their employees was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing the hand sign" or something? Those HR white women are gonna become SS uniform Gestapo in an instant and throw you in the gulag for wrongthink. But what is interesting is that Iron Stylist X Riot Guy proves his haters right, where he posted this image of Fiora from League of Legends that he worked on, where he said this. "Case in point, when I worked on the Fiora rework, there was shit fit by gamers when we gave her a unique face. And that was stylized, but one that showed structure. So much of a shit fit that we caved to demands. I did this paint over to make her more pretty. I was pissed about this, and to be transparent, the Splash team didn't want to make the changes. Because there was such a small difference in the changes, but here we are, defending simply chiseling a woman's face who was supposed to be severe looking." So Iron Stylist admits that he and his team attempted to make Fiora uglier on purpose. That's literally what he just admitted to, wasn't it? You just ousted yourself for the same thing you're trying to defend Outlaws against. So he admits that it's a deliberate push by Western devs to uglify female characters on purpose. Sure, he can try to say it was to make them look sharper or whatever. But the end result, regardless of intentions, is that what he tried ended up making the character uglier, and it pissed off fans. So how can we take the opinions of a guy who admits he's bowed down to the Western mind virus when it comes to Outlaws' Sigourney Ma'am Solo alien hybrid main character? We can't, because to him, Giga Chad Diamond Chin over there is what he wants to see more of. even though the character looks nothing like their actor, yet we do know Western studios are capable of making their characters look like their actors. Cause for some reason, every goddamn time I see Deborah Wilson's face show up in a video game, every studio in existence seems to be able to get her face right immediately. Maybe her face just fits the ideal of Western studios, I guess, but why is it that Deborah Wilson's characters always look exactly like her? But Outlaws' main character doesn't, and don't give me that they can't do it, since why does Cal Kestis from Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor look exactly like Cameron Monaghan? Like, look at this. This is 1-to-1. Come on now. What is it? Are computer programs sexist now? Are we trying to imply that game development software somehow recognizes female faces over male ones and sabotages it without any input from human hands? Because if so, that's hilarious, and at least the game software can tell us what a woman is. When if you ask that question to any one of these woke devs, they look you dead in the eye and tell you that they're not biologists. It's insane we even have to have these conversations, since 10 or so years ago, there was nowhere near as prevalent as it is now. I weep for the future of female video game characters, man, I really do. Eventually, they're all going to look like amorphous blobs of skin and bone that exist between the peaks of the uncanny valley. And more game developers who think this way enter the industry every day. The times ahead are going to be rough when it comes to wanting actual real women in video games, considering the people making them can't even tell you what women are to begin with. And I can already hear someone typing, well, how do you know this Iron Stylist guy is a woke activist weirdo exactly? Maybe they just want to make female characters the way they want. Well, dear viewers, let's get into the DeLorean so we can travel back to 2020 to read some tweets from the same guy. He said in 2020, ultimately, even active inclusivity is not sufficient to change fundamentally the framework in which we design. It is crucial to challenge the structure of limited awareness and institutional bias. Those assumptions must be torn down. As a follow-up, this isn't meant to be a call-out to developers who don't acquiesce to movements of social progress, but it is an invitation to gain awareness of a cause and see which way your audience is evolving. What have you got to lose? You have only appreciation to gain. Movements like Black Lives Matter and other organizations fundamentally bring the inherent conflict necessary to challenge institutionalized disenfranchisement to the doorstep of oppression. Other aware cultural contributes must follow. So as developers of cultural buttresses and bedrock, developers must be aligned with those causes. Stand with those individuals as they are our audience and most importantly, our most sacred of human brethren. Holy crap, dude, this reads like some revolutionary attempting to take back a country than a guy who just draws for a living. There's so much there to untangle, but the fact he states his mission in gaming is to tear down what he calls the structure of limited awareness and institutional bias, that tells you everything you need to know, man. This guy isn't a game developer at heart. His activism takes precedence over everything else. And he unironically champions Black Lives Matter, which we know is a corrupt organization that has been documented aplenty, where their leaders have stolen millions in funds meant to fix struggling black communities for themselves in order to buy mansions and luxury goods. Anyone who champions for Black Lives Matter is crazy, dude. Seriously. That was a giant grift scam that stole money from people, and they actually used that money to buy multiple houses in gated communities, which ironically blocks the very same struggling black communities they said that they would help from visiting them. Insane, dude. Truly, the virtue signaling is so off the charts, we're falling off the cliff like Kratos in the first God of War, and we're falling at terminal velocity at this point. And the fact he says developers must be aligned with such causes is crazy. This is not a game developer. This is a woke activist who wants to tear down the entire industry in the name of virtue signaling. I can't make that more clear than I can right here. This guy is genuinely wanting the industry to burn and cleanse it of anyone with wrongthink. He's also another activist dev who says unironically that stand with those individuals as they are our audience. So what he means is that the audience of video games wants these changes in their content, according to him. He is saying that game devs need to make experiences that reject players like you and me, and instead they must make content meant for the modern audience. Which again, I don't know how many times I gotta say it, but the modern audience does not exist. The only audience is who's already been here. So it's no wonder this guy is ex-Riot. Wherever he's working now, I can only imagine the slop that he's coming up with. The fact people like this are not even unique in the industry is why the game's medium in the West at least is falling apart at the seams. Games are more expensive than ever before, like Outlaws wanting almost $200 for all its content out of the gate. And yet they believe we should not only accept such absurd prices for slop, but also be willing to bend over backwards to appease to their crazy identity political demands. I hope Star Wars Outlaws opens people's eyes and this Iron Stylus artist guy is an insane person who wants video games to become political checkboxes instead of being true escapism entertainment. But things get worse, friends, so let's switch over to Tomb Raider now. From Bounding into Comics, we have this article titled, Tomb Raider Shadows of the Truth TTRPG Guidebook confirms Crystal Dynamics working to apologize for franchise's colonialist origins. So there's a tabletop RPG game akin to something like Dungeons & Dragons coming from the appropriately named Evil Hat Productions, who also published another title before called Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Yes, they named it that on purpose to get the response you likely just gave to that title being read out. Apparently in this tabletop game, Tomb Raider is now apologizing for its colonialism roots and the whole act of tomb raiding, which is in its name of course, but it's now problematic, which is crazy, but it gets worse. Evil Hat Productions had more to say on this. Here's what they have in their actual guidebook for this tabletop Tomb Raider game, and I quote, "What then is raiding and how does it mirror colonial practices? Raiding, as depicted in the original Tomb Raider games and stories, involves going to ancient tombs and historical sites of different civilizations and acquiring artifacts. It operates on the assumption of finders keepers that grants raiders with the means and drive to claim ownership of artifacts, regardless of whether they have any historical or cultural claim to the treasure. Later games released in the franchise have started the work of addressing this by having Lara Croft acknowledge her past mistakes and try to understand and show respect for the cultures and communities she comes into contact with. She has also worked to reform raider culture and raise the awareness of her peers. Lara no longer decorates her mantle with mythic artifacts. As a raider, she prioritizes seeking out the truth. Much of this game is inspired by her humanity, struggle with heroism, and her tenacity. We believe that all three aspects are an important component in creating a game that celebrates history and culture while acknowledging the respect and work required to live in a world wounded by colonialism. In this game, we seek to continue and that work alongside Crystal Dynamics by creating a sandbox for you to tell stories that address colonialist themes in play and create your own stories of respect and support for the people and cultures your seekers encounter," end quote. So there you have it, fellas. Not only is this tabletop game removing raiding tombs from a franchise called Tomb Raider, but Crystal Dynamics, which was responsible for that new trilogy of games we had in the last decade, are now transforming Lara Croft completely. She will no longer be a Tomb Raider, but a seeker of truth, so she won't claim artifacts she's found, nor will she embrace the fact that she is a Tomb Raider. Instead, she will virtue signal and educate people on archaeology while fighting bad guys who are raiding tombs, I guess. Of course, Lara will still leave entire civilizations in devastation as stuff explodes all over. She will likely decimate ecosystems with bullets and fire and leave scores of dead white men, because I guarantee you, that's who the villains will be in the next game, all over the civilization she protects as a seeker of truth. They're turning Lara Croft into basically a hall monitor for ancient artifacts, and at this point you have to ask yourself, why even call the franchise Tomb Raider anymore? And why not just make a new franchise altogether? Of course, we know why, which is that they need the IP name in order to show the product. Because if they called this new franchise Truth Seeker, nobody would care and absolutely no one would buy it. Like always, these political activists are simply taking something that has a built-in fan base, co-opting it, and transforming it to fit their own modern ideals. They did it with Suicide Squad, and don't forget that Crystal Dynamics tried to do this already with Marvel's Avengers, where they marketed a game called Avengers, but the main character was a young woman of color named Kamala Khan instead. And the game not only failed in every way, but you can no longer buy the game either. And instead of learning from their failures, Crystal Dynamics is instead doubling down on their virtue signaling and will now apply the same tone deafness to Tomb Raider. I can almost guarantee that if this position is not changed, their new Tomb Raider reboot will not do well at all. And it will likely end with Crystal Dynamics shutting its doors, but at this point, they've proven that they don't care about the franchises under their wings anyways. They just see Tomb Raider and Avengers as vehicles to push activism, even if said activism is rejected unanimously and their products quite literally cease to exist at times. These are the same people who tried to shame players who played the remasters and put a text saying these games do not reflect Crystal Dynamics' ethics. Yet those Tomb Raider remastered games sold well apparently, and that likely pissed off Crystal Dynamics, because that means that the old Tomb Raider is clearly what people want. But of course, that old Tomb Raider actually raided tombs and featured a strong female action hero as a main character who fought dinosaurs and stuff. This new Lara Croft is a DEI feminist brain-rotted activist who wants to protect cultures in a game called Tomb Raider of all things. These activist game devs will not stop until every franchise and concept is retroactively changed to fit their modern ideals. Nobody wants a Seeker of Truth Tomb Raider game, but does it surprise us at all? Not really, sadly. Again, that tabletop game is a glimpse into Tomb Raider's eventual next game future, which also has a black, overweight woman with not one but two amputated legs wielding a bow and arrow. The virtue signaling is off the charts with that design alone. Can someone tell me, how does someone with two fake legs and a fat midriff raid tombs and climb stuff without dying from lifting all that weight constantly? Alright, don't answer that question by the way, otherwise you're a bigot, so just consume content like the good piggy you are, or that's what they want anyways. But remember that it's up to you, me, and everyone else to not allow these things to flourish. We can't stop this new Seeker of Truth nonsense game from happening, but we can also not buy it and instead just point and laugh instead. Just like Star Wars Outlaws and the weird political chokehold they have on their devs with their equal signs nonsense, or that ex-Riot Games artist who ousted themselves as a crazy activist, who supports scams like Black Lives Matter, everything in Western gaming is seemingly getting worse. And it may seem bad now, but just remember, it's as Grum said, just don't buy any of this stuff for the next 2 years and just play your backlog instead. And all of these companies will be reeling in losses and will have to submit to your wants and needs in order to survive. So ignore the crimson chin of feminism and reject the truth seekers and large midriffs of Tomb Raider. We don't have to support any of these people if we don't want to, and they know that, and they're hoping that you're too stupid or blind to realize that yourself. The game industry is wrapped in a fat stinky diaper smelling of the sweet baby, and apparently if rumors are correct, Ubisoft's other major release later this year, which is Assassin's Creed Red, and it's also set in Japan in case you didn't know, apparently Sweet Baby is directly involved with that too. Ubisoft did say that this was their year to turn things around, but Skull and Bones failed. Outlaws is feminist slop, and Ass Creed is going full DEI bridge apparently on us. Well, we told you guys so and you didn't listen, so now we gotta do it the hard way. But what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching, subscribe, like, and share the video, and thanks to my patrons for their support. Have a wonderful day, go enjoy some video games that don't hate you, and I'll see you in the next one.